And good evening and welcome to the Kauffman Corner, a little podcast about the Kansas City Royals. And we got a lot to discuss this week. With us, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, fresh off his trip, his pilgrimage, as I have called it, his annual pilgrimage to check out the Royals at Kauffman Stadium. Co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, co-author of Rob and Rany and the Royals, author of Rany and the Royals, longtime Royals fan, always baseball thinker. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can hear my show 2 to 6 Central Time at 810WHB.com. We also want to get into the rule changes. We'll do a quick lap around some of the goings-ons with the ball club. But really, we want to focus on just the impression firsthand, up close. And it wasn't just you, Rany, that was in town. One of your fellow co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, Joe Sheehan, who writes the Joe Sheehan Baseball Newsletter, which we both would highly recommend to any baseball fans out there. He came in from New York City, where he left the big market to come to a small market town. He and I battle about big market, small market economics on my radio show from time to time. He joined you. I'm excited. I saw you guys were just beginning the quest when I brought you on the radio show on Friday. So what was the end result of the pilgrimage this year?
Um, well, if my number one mission for Joe Sheehan's first ever trip to Kansas City was something we've been talking about for 30 years. I've known him, and finally got him to Kansas City. My mission was for him to concede that Kansas City was a great baseball city and just a great city, period. And on that mission, I think we succeeded.
Okay.
I think ultimately he loved the ballpark. He was really impressed with not just the park itself, and he did make the point. I mean, he's used to so many of the stadiums nowadays are like in the middle of downtown, are urban, and the Royals may have that stadium of their own one day. But if anything, because so many ballparks now are within a city, having one that's sort of stationed out by itself was an unusual experience and a clean. He really liked the clean environment, the obviously the ample parking, but even the sight lines. Like, there was nothing to distract you from the game behind. There was no historic building to take your eye away from the game itself. And he actually really enjoyed that because that's not an experience you get very often. The play on the
Can I
field.
just say that that's interesting because back in the day, and as we know, Kauffman has been enhanced over the years quite a bit. If you go back and look at a game in 1977, you're like, oh my God, they're playing in a Lego park. I mean, there's just so bare, devoid of. I remember when everyone hated the advertisements. Now you see it, and you're like, what is that naked place they're playing in right there? It has been enhanced overall, but what used to be called sterile is now called clean. You're telling me by those. I think that's a fantastic juxtaposition in how it's viewed.
Well, when everyone else is zigging, you should zag, and that's sort of where the Royals are now. And I mean, he made the point. It's the sixth oldest ballpark in the country. I think it's Fenway, Wrigley, then Dodger Stadium, and then the Big A in Anaheim, which, like Kauffman, has been renovated extensively, and then the dump that Oakland still calls home for the time being. So it's a historic ballpark, and it's the only ballpark of that era that is still in use because it was the only ballpark that they had the wisdom to build two separate stadiums, one for baseball, one for football, so that you didn't have this multi-purpose stadium that pleased nobody and would get shut down in 30 years or whatever. It's become a victim of its own success in the sense of it's been around for so long, in part because it was such a good ballpark originally and they just needed to give it a facelift. So yeah, the ballpark he really loved. He was very impressed with the fan base. I mean, we were fortunate enough on Friday night to sit in the crown seats, which neither one of us had actually done before, to sit in the seats directly behind home plate. You get special privileges and a special entrance for food. And I've sat in those seats in Chicago, and I will say the people who sit in those seats, at least in Chicago, not the biggest fans in the world. In terms of, I don't think half of them could name four members of the White Sox lineup before the game. It's a place for people to be seen, to see and be seen, to have good food, entertain guests. Joe talks about it in New York. He calls it the moat seats because there's literally like almost a concrete moat that keeps the riffraff out from those seats. And those seats in New York go for $1,500 and up. And the only people sitting there are people who are so rich they don't need to worry about what's going on at the game. They don't have to root for Aaron Judge. They can buy and sell Aaron Judge. So those fans, those are the seats you see on TV, and half the time they're just empty because even as expensive as they are, people are spending most of their time back in the cafeteria, in the buffet line instead of watching the game. And what really struck us both was that the crowd, even the ground seats in Kansas City, the fans, they were all paying attention to the game. They all knew the team. They were almost all decked out in Royals paraphernalia. So I think he was really somewhat taken aback by just how much passion. I mean, he's seen it. Obviously in 2014, 2015. Anybody who's been around that long knows that the Royals have a fan base that if you just give them a product worth rooting for, they will turn out in droves. But I think to see it up close really caught his eye. And then the biggest thing I would say, which surprised me even, and surprised you when we talked on Friday on your radio show, is that he might be more optimistic about the franchise's talent than you and I are, because he just keeps making the point that the base of hitters that they've brought up this season, which we've talked about on the show, um, as many times as we've talked about it, that is a real foundation that he really thinks in 2 or 3 years could lead to a winning team. And to hear Joe Sheehan, my foil and yours, my foil for 30 years about the Royals, and he's almost always right and I'm almost always wrong, but those 2 years that I've got on him, I will never let him live down. But to hear him be actually more optimistic about the talent that's come through the system this year, that was eye-opening for me.
Do you think he was, one, for lack of a better term, kissing your ass? Because here he was on this trip to your team, your ballpark, and one, I think it sounds like he had the same kind of experience that many people have when they come to Kansas City, when they come to the Midwest, but in particular, Kansas City. I can't speak to what kind of reactions you get in Chicago when people come to Chicago for the first time. First of all, I don't know who the hell their first time in Chicago is, in their late adult life, right? Everybody's had some reason to go to Chicago, usually earlier on, but we know that the experience that people have when they come to Kansas City is generally an incredibly pleasant one. Oh, I never realized it's kind of like a hidden gem, they'll all say. And so do you think, because I'm starting to get concerned about the hitting, right? So Joe liked it because he liked what they've been graded on the way up, because the numbers right now from no one says superstar. There's nobody hitting the ground running like, Fernando Tatis. Not even, I mean, I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be a fine player, but are we predicting Hall of Fame for Bobby Witt Jr. right now? I mean, which ones in particular, I guess, were standing out to Joe?
Okay, well, first off, Joe, there's no way, if Joe were kissing my ass, that would be literally the first time in the decades that I've known him that he's ever blown smoke up my butt and actually said something nice that he didn't mean. It's usually the other way around.
Right.
Now, I will say he might have been in some sort of fugue state, hallucinatory state, thanks to all the barbecue that we ate over the weekend. We got off the plane, and immediately, we had talked about, going somewhere close to the radio station, since we're going to come on your show shortly after we landed. And I just made a late audible. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to skip this place. This trip started off right. We went straight to Joe's.
Okay.
Joe met Joe's. And so we had Joe's on Friday. And then Saturday we went to Jack Stack.
Okay.
And Sunday, before the last game, we went to Q39.
Okay.
And I think I did a pretty darn good job of picking 3 of the best barbecue places in town that all complemented each other very well. I mean, Joe's is in a gas station. Jack Stack's got the fine tablecloth, and the sit down place. Q39 somewhere in the middle, and it was amazing. I will say, having never done it before, I'm not sure I would recommend eating barbecue 3 days in a row.
Oh man, I know,
and especially some of the barbecue that I had. Because let's put it this way. I was a carnivore this weekend. Today, Soren, my friend, I was a vegan. I can't think about meat right now with just without feeling a little bit nauseous. I may be a vegan for a couple of days, but it was, oh my god, so worth it. My friend Joe's rankings. I think he had Joe's of Kansas City still number one. That's
Okay,
the place
thank
I've
you.
been. It's been my go-to place for really probably a decade now. Often imitated, never duplicated, and it was a chance for me to really see, to do this in 3 days in a row. Really give me a chance to see, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man, and to see if anybody could beat the man. And Joe's is still the best.
Yeah.
And I think he had. I mean, to give you an idea of how sturdy the competition was. Q39 he had second. I think he had Jack Stack third, and yet I would argue maybe the single uh, best food item we had the whole weekend was at Jack Stack's. I ordered the lamb ribs, and I was in no way prepared for the half of a lamb that was just dropped onto my plate. And you pick up the ribs, and I mean, immediately when you pick one up and one side the meat just
Yeah.
barely hanging onto the bone. It's like a meatsicle that you can just slide into your. Right then this is going to be a good time. But
I've said to people, from other towns that ask me about barbecue, when I lived in Las Vegas, I think at that time, and there's been so much construction, I lived there from 96 to 98. And at that time, 16 of the 17 largest hotels in the world were in Las Vegas. And it was like, oh, what's the biggest? I'm like, they're all in Vegas, right? Like, and then what's your flavor? I feel like that's barbecue. Like 16 of the 17 or 16 of the 20 best in the world are in Kansas City. So if you're third best in Kansas City, you're probably third best in the world. You're eighth best in Kansas City, you're no worse than ninth best in the world. And so a salute to all. I'm obviously partial to Joe's Kansas City barbecue. When I lived in over there off of Rainbow, the Joe's at the gas station was
mhm.
my go-to spot, and I worked right there around the corner as well. And so we were there all the time, and it never got old. And it's incredible. And so I obviously think Joe's is number one. I make no bones about that. But a salute to all of them. And somebody mentioned Gates, another one of our great Kansas City iconic locations. All the barbecue in Kansas City is pretty damn good. Like if you got crappy barbecue, you've screwed something up because like Kansas City knows how to barbecue. But I mean, I do like, especially at our age, like crushing three big barbecue meals and incredible sides and everything. That's tough to do.
It is, and that was it. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, Soren. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was 17, I could house a porterhouse
Mhm.
and like not even know the next day that I ate it. It was a mistake to do 3 days in a row, but it was a glorious mistake. We
Yeah.
knew going in. I mean, I think I tweeted out that we were going to be eating an irresponsible amount of barbecue, and I was right because it was very irresponsible of me, and I may be paying for it for a while, but it was so good. It was so hard to resist. So yes. So whatever Joe said on the screen here. Yeah, I've been in Chicago too long. Too much Portillo's.
Yeah.
Portillo's is the closest thing we have in Chicago to a cult favorite. They do hamburgers, they do Italian beef, they do all the sort of classic Chicago's, and they do it very well. But no, Portillo's does not hold a candle. If I had a Portillo's next door to me and Joe's was 45 minutes away, I'd be eating Joe's every week, and Portillo's not at all. So,
By the way, Terry
um,
said, "Who needs the Royals? More
yeah,
barbecue."
more barbecue.
I
I've got to try again. I mean, as Joe said, he's got to come back to Kansas City at least 10 more times in order to try every good
yeah.
barbecue place in the city, and we may make that happen at some point. So yes, maybe his opinions about the Royals were somewhat colored by that. We had just come from Joe's when he came on the air,
He claimed he was in a meat coma.
well, I wasn't sure we would stay awake during your during your show, to be perfectly honest with you. So yes, maybe that was part of it, but honestly, I think I think he was not blowing smoke. I think he's taken we have to watch these guys, day in and day out, and they have their highs and their lows, and the offense has had moments this season where even with all those young hitters, they just seem completely impotent. But he's taking the big picture look at this and knowing how difficult it is for rookies to succeed, to see so many guys who are not dominating, but none of them are really struggling. And that's the point I want to make. You're talking about, there's no world beaters here. It's really interesting just how average almost all of these guys have been. I'm going to read off some numbers here for you, which is
Okay.
basically just the OPS plus. Remember, so using OPS plus because it's very simple. 100 is league average of pretty much basically every guy, every rookie, or every guy who's made his debut for the Royals this season. All right. So Vinny Pasquantino leads all these guys with a 122 OPS plus. That's legitimately, very good. Not star, but that's like a well above average, territory. Then you got Michael Massey at 106, Bobby Witt at 104, Nate Eaton 103, Michael Garcia finds it's 9 games, but 103, MJ Melendez 99, Nick Prado 93, Emmanuel Rivera was at 91 before he was traded, and then Drew Waters at 88. So every one of those guys is really within a very narrow band where not great, but not bad.
Well, no, wait, hang on. Not average.
Well,
100
average
is
is 100.
average.
Yeah, so all those guys are between 90 and about 105.
Yeah, but most of them are below 100.
No.
Just run the numbers. Just run
so
the
Pasquantino, Massey, Witt, Eaton, Garcia are above 100. Melendez is at 99. And then you have Prado and Emmanuel Rivera. Let's not even count him. He's gone. We have Prado and Drew Waters, who are at 93 and 89. The only one who's really bad is Kyle Isbell, who didn't debut. He's a rookie, but debuted last year. And Waters, I mean, he's got 40, 47, 58 plate appearances. I mean, if he hits a home run in his next at bat, he will have an OPS plus above 100. So it's a small sample size. Again, nobody's world beating here.
I wasn't locked in as much on the early guys, so it's better than I was.
They're not great, but I mean, Pasquantino is, I would say, well above average. Everyone else is within shouting distance of average, good or bad. That's not, I mean, average is average, but average for a rookie who's in most cases 23 years old, they don't have to improve a lot for suddenly to have 4 or 5 guys who are 110, 115 OPS guys. And then you're cooking, and then you just have to find 1 or 2 other guys to go with them in that lineup. And suddenly you have a playoff caliber lineup, especially in the AL Central, as we always talk about. And I mean, you look at the AL Central right now, where 73 and 65 is first place. I think his optimism is warranted. The Royals will need to develop these guys, but the talent is there. All the issues we are having this season are on the pitching side.
Yes, I get that. By the way, Matt, always the optimist, notes Nicky Lopez is a 66. He also notes that Rivera is a 122 with Arizona for what it's worth. Right?
Yeah.
So just for full disclosure, to note that we don't just shape the numbers to back up our points. Matt's keeping it real there. And by the way, if you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, we normally stream on Sunday nights. We've been bouncing around between Sunday and Monday. I'm not going to say Sunday or Monday night is when we stream live. You can be part of the conversation at Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. I believe LinkedIn. You can also get in to the conversation, and the stream goes out to all of them. So if you'd like to be in the chat room and have your comments heard, that's a way to do it. And so we welcome everybody to join us. We got a number of folks on with us tonight. But yes, I mean, it's the ceiling, and we talked about this on Friday on the radio show. It's the fact that these are not finished products. Nicky Lopez, the ceiling is starting to go away, right? Salvador Perez is not going to be a 325 on base guy. That part's gone. If he hits for power and he catches, hey, that's great. That's the exciting part, is that all these guys should be able to get better. We do still wait for the guy who hits the ground running as an all-star caliber player. And as much as we talk about really 3 frontline, and I think we're getting to a point now with Brady Singer, and we had the point somebody said they're going up to early on. Somebody said the Chiefs win, Brady Singer dominates, and the Broncos lose on Monday night. By the way, yes, thank you for the recognition. Some folks pointed out I did have the Seahawks plus the 6.5, so that was my call today. So I hope everybody jumped on that action. Did not have the guts to go with Geno Smith on the money line. I can't do that. But I think it is important to note that Brady Singer is coming along. So add Brady Singer to your Dono Ventura and Danny Duffy. 3. Now I think we can say comfortably 3 starting pitchers have been developed, but still yet to have a guy just hit the ground and be an offensive force, right? Like there still is no. I mean, I don't know which is tougher, right? have as few starting pitchers as they have, or to never be able to get that guy that, where's the Carlos Beltran? Where is, that guy from this organization? We still kind of are waiting on that, right?
We are. I mean, I will say the closest guy to that is Pasquantino, who the 122 OPS. That's nothing to sneeze at. And
Small sample still.
small sample, 51 games. But you know what? The last, I think, touted or certainly young rookie to come up, as opposed to like Whit Merrifield coming up, at age 27. But guy who's this young who came up who did hit like this in a small sample size as a rookie was Salvador Perez, who was only 21 but had a 128 OPS plus as opposed to 122, but like within the same range, and it was only 39 games. Pasquantino's already played in more games than Salvi did when he was a rookie, and the Royals saw enough that winter to get him signed to a long-term deal, which very clearly turned into such a good deal for the team that they literally had to tear it up and give him a new extension. And this is something Joe and I were talking about, is terms of what do you do to start locking these guys up long term. We've talked about it. Do you go to Bobby Witt? And frankly, I think I'm not sure you can get Bobby Witt for the money he wants right now. I don't think it would be responsible potentially. If there's one guy, not only because of his performance, I think there's one guy who fits that mold of get this guy inked to a long-term deal now.
Hunter Dozier.
Hunter Dozier, that's right. That's the next Hunter Dozier, the guy that you and I are going to be yelling about 4 years from now. How the hell did the Royals give this guy a long-term deal? No, I think the risk is pretty small that we will be regretting if the Royals give Vinny Pasquantino a long-term contract. And again, this is a guy who didn't get a ton of money, like Salvador Perez, who was more amenable to signing in part because he didn't get a lot of money when he was signed as an amateur. He got like $60,000, and was somebody to whom the guarantee of $10 or $20 million, to set him and his family up for life might have been worth turning down the potential to make a lot more than that. Whereas someone like Eric Hosmer, who already got $6 million in the draft, or Mike Moustakas, who got $4 million, it wasn't as much of a priority for them. Well, Pasquantino was an 11th round draft pick. And has not made a ton of money in the game. So he might be amenable to that, especially as a guy who, will be probably 29 or 30 by the time he's a free agent. I think he'd be 30. Can you get that guy signed to, sign away all 6 years before free agency, but on in return, you get 2 or even 3 club options, and you turn to your fan base. It's not just about simply, trying to get long-term cost savings or get him under club control into his 30s. It's to be able to turn to the fan base and say, we're building around this guy, and also to turn to the other players on the roster and say, we are making a commitment. I feel like the hardest player to get signed to a long-term deal, a young player, is the first one. And every time you sign one, you're setting a standard. You're setting a culture of commitment from the organization that we want you guys to grow together, to be together long term when we as an organization turn this around. And I feel like Pasquantino could be the linchpin of that. Start with him now, and then you can have that discussion. If you can get Bobby Witt, great. But if not, you can have that discussion potentially with Nick Prado if he gets off to a good start next year, or Michael Massey, or even like a Drew Waters if his offensive step forward becomes something legitimate next year. But I think Pasquantino's the one guy I think you have confidence will actually be worth a long-term commitment, who might be amenable to signing it now.
Let's be honest on where we sit right now with the Kansas City Royals as well. We've talked about it the last couple of episodes of the Kauffman Corner that, Dayton Moore has always been a guy that, at least initially, he said to me when he came to town, I'd rather wait an extra year, be more certain, and pay a little more for what I'm getting, right? And I said, hey, I'm going to this once we get done with the season, I'm going to have that conversation again. Do you still view it that way? And I think it's going to be interesting to see what he says, because one of the things is, we mentioned how low their farm system was rated. I talked to John Manuel from Baseball America, and he said, look, they're not going to be 30th for long, and was talking about the different guys that were going to be added and that they'd start making their way up, and all the guys that had graduated to the big leagues. But they're not loaded. And so I think the one thing that is clear is they better get some guys signed, right? Like, I don't know that you can be patient and wait and sure and pay more. because if you wait too long and the guy goes, "Nah, I'm close enough. I'm going to play it out. Like I'll get paid in arbitration." You don't necessarily have another wave of reinforcements coming, right? Like, so I do think that's one of the things that may force their hand on at least getting, if not one, then multiple guys. And I will also say, listen, if you obviously felt very strongly about Drew Waters, right? Vinny Pasquantino, you've pointed out mathematically, analytically, has the numbers that say he's the real deal. Whoever else you feel very strongly about, I think if you sign multiple guys and one turns up bad, you're still the better for it. And I don't know. The Royals have struggled to get their arms around some of the basic analytics, I think, or at least, commit themselves to valuing them at the level that they should. I don't know that they will buy into that simple math that, oh, we only have the one. Yeah, but even that one, as sure as you might be, going all in on Vinny Pasquantino does not assure you that Vinny Pasquantino will one either. And one of them might be the guy's good. He just breaks down. Like that was kind of Carlos Baerga of the Indians. When the Indians signed Baerga, for the older listeners, Baerga, Kenny Lofton, I don't know. I don't think they got Albert Bell signed because of
they everybody but Bell. The Indians. It's funny you mention them, or it's appropriate you mention them. They were literally the first team,
yes,
to really adapt to what the rules of modern free agency and be like, we're going to sign our guys really early on, and
yeah,
we're going to keep them around. And the guy that I remember I was like a freshman in college, sophomore in college when this really started. The one name that really stood out to me was Jim Thome.
yeah.
They signed Jim Thome. I still remember. He had come up at like late 91, played a little bit in 92. He had 369 career at bats, and almost like a Pasquantino, had shown plate discipline, had shown pop, had not struck out in an extreme amount, but like the analytic numbers suggested this guy's going to be a superstar. I mean, he was like 20, but they signed him to like a 5-year deal with like 3 clubs. I think they had him under control for 7 or 8 years. And I remember the industry was like, what the hell are the Indians doing? Because this is like the Indians were still losing 90 games every year, and it was a stroke of genius. He was like the third or fourth guy they had signed. They had already signed Lofton. But you mentioned Baerga, Thome, and then Manny Ramirez. I think they may have even gotten a year or two of him under contract. The only guy they couldn't sign long term was Albert Brown. Maybe Chuck Nagy, the pitcher, as well. Like they were throwing long term contracts at rookies and sophomores right and left, and at prices which would very quickly turn out to be steals, and kept that team together throughout the entire 1990s. Now
Well, and you bled into the pitching part of it, which I'll come back to. But yet you're right on all those guys, and I think there was even one or two more I might be missing because I had a classmate, at Syracuse that was from Cleveland, and he was a big Indians fan, and he's like coming alive in '95. That was his
Mhm.
slogan. I graduated in '93, so give you an idea. And I think they may have come around in '94, right? Kicked the door in '94. I don't know what the hell. I can't remember what year they finally broke through. But his slogan when we were in college was coming alive in '95. And my point to that is it created genuine excitement in Cleveland, a
Mhm.
franchise that had not peed a drop in decades. Fans were starting to reinvest in the Indians and now Guardians. And to that point, if you did that, it's why I say I don't care. You almost have to sign multiple guys. One, mathematically, I think it's the right thing to do. Spread the money around 5 guys. If 3 of them hit, you're still pretty good. If 4 of them hit, you're great. If you sign one guy and he gets hurt, Pasquantino battles injuries, the shoulder becomes a chronic problem, whatever it is, and it goes south, well, then you're overpaying for other guy. You're paying premium dollars for other guys. It doesn't work. The other thing is you create genuine excitement. You tell your fans, we believe in these guys, right? As it stands right now, there's a little bit of, well, what do we have here? And the other thing is, whether you sign or don't, if they're not good, you're fired anyway, right? So you might as well bank on the fact that you've made the right decision and that once you're proven right, you'll have a team that's cost effective. And then you mentioned the pitching. Jason Beret was like another guy that came up then. I can't remember if they signed Beret or not, but they had, I think it was Charles Nagy and Jason Beret, maybe like one other young starter. But then they supplemented with Denny Martinez and Oral Hershiser
Mhm.
and guys that were veterans, much more cost effective. They weren't at the peak of their game. They were on the downslope of the game, but still effective pitchers. But that was something you and I and Joe Sheehan talked about on Friday. You've got to prove that this team's good enough. Like, somebody mentioned that here's right here. Hawk and what is that? Hawk and SCM. Hosmer and Moose were Boris guys, and they had big draft bonuses. Best guys to lock up are the ones who weren't early first-round picks and who would appreciate a payday in exchange for free agent years. I'll go back, and his point's a good one. It's also that, we think of Scott Boras as a villain here. Certainly the Players Association doesn't. But because it's generally him guiding Carlos Beltran and Moose and Hosmer to other locations. But when Hosmer signed with San Diego, he said, with the great young talent that they have in their system, this team is going to win. And winning's one of the things that's important to Eric Hosmer. And we can all sit, it didn't end up being a good deal for the San Diego Padres. But Eric Hosmer did go and very quickly end up playing for a winning team. And Boras is no boob. And I do think Boras guys want to win. They want to get paid. Everybody wants to get paid. But they want to win as well. And I think that's what the Royals have to do. And I think they would even somewhat sell themselves to potential free agents, maybe not the highest free agents out there, but to the downslope Oral Hershiser's, Denny Martinez's, whoever it might be, that yes, this is a place you can come and win because this is good young talent with the numbers you had, and they believe in them. If they're not going to sign them, why should Boras and his clients believe, or any agent and their clients believe, that yes, if I sign on here, even though they haven't won, they're going to win? If you don't believe in the players to make the smart economic move, why should anybody else? And I think that they'll benefit in free agency if they start signing some guys and at least put a sign out that we believe we're going in the right direction.
Right. And you have to start somewhere. I mean, you can't, it's difficult to sign 3 or 4 or 5 guys to long-term deals in the same offseason. So it's going to have to be staggered by its very nature. So start with one now, get Pasquantino under club control, and you have, I don't think you have to do it all this year. A lot of this can be done as late as next offseason. I mean, none of these guys, except for Bobby Witt, is going to be a free agent until after the 2028 season. So 2023, even early 2024, you can sign some of these guys. But you're going to have to, if you really want to do it right, you're going to want to get at least 4 or 5 of these guys under contract. So do one now. I'm looking at this very interesting. By the way, the 1995 Indians might be my favorite non-championship team ever. I mean, I can still name pretty much that entire lineup because it was such a masterclass of team construction. The other guy I think that had a long-term deal actually is Sandy Alomar. We hadn't mentioned him. There was just so much talent on that team.
Yes.
They traded for him, and then he was signed for. So I mean, they had Alomar basically for the entire 90s. Tomei for the entire 90s. Manny Ramirez for the entire. Like these guys were there. So even after they didn't win in 95, they were still together and went to the World Series again in 97. And, they won 5 straight division titles from 95 to 99. I'm actually looking here because I mentioned Jim Tomei, who Jim Tomei himself might be my favorite non-Royal player of all time. And it's actually kind of eerie almost how similar his 1993 season, which was the season after which they gave him his long-term deal, was to Vinny Pasquantino's rookie season right now. Tomei played in 47 games. Vinny's played in 51. Tomei hit 266. Pasquantino's hitting 261. Tomei had 29 walks and 36 strikeouts. Vinny has 24 and 27. And that's the thing about Vinny is we've talked about it in the minor leagues, but even the biggest jump of his career to the major leagues, he still has a strikeout to walk ratio of almost 1-to-1. 27 walks, 24 strikeouts. Tomei had 11 doubles and 7 homers. Vinny's got 7 doubles and 8 homers. Now, he's not Jim Tomei. Tomei was a year younger. Actually 2 years younger, and he was a third baseman at that time still. But I mean, Jim Tomei's a freaking, Hall of Famer who's hit 612 home runs in his career. Like, it's just interesting, the combination of plate discipline, contact, and power. The Indians saw that and were like, we want to commit to this guy for the rest of the decade. Maybe the Royals should consider the same thing with Vinny at the end of the season.
I would agree. And Pasquantino would be the one leading the charge, but I think they need to identify who the other players are. And if it's MJ, get him signed. If it's Bobby Wood Jr., get him signed. I think they've got to do it. I think this is an interesting one from Zach, who said, what's a realistic payroll for the Royals going forward? Not saying they're all in, but how much should they be willing to spend to be viable? And, I think that's a great question. They've only got $32 million on the books for next year confirmed. Now, they'll go through arbitration with a number of players. My guess is, and I can go through and ballpark numbers on these guys, and I will do that at some point, probably at the end of the season. I'll do it and say, okay, here's your commitment if you're going to arbitration with all these guys. I'm going to guess roughly they're going to come up towards $70 million. $60 to $70 million. Maybe I'm overvaluing some guys, but $60 to $70 million in player commitments. The average salary in Major League Baseball, average payroll in Major League Baseball is over 100 million. And I don't know that the Royals have to be held to the standard of having an average payroll. Number one, they're not an average size market. And number two, they're not proving they're ready to win. It's going to be pretty hard. They now, I think, just have to go 6-15 in their last 21 to avoid losing 100. No badge of honor. But it does look like they're going to avoid losing 100 games this year.
Soren,
I think that's a great question, though. Not to get too far. Go ahead, make your joke, and then we'll come back.
No joke. I was going to say we don't have to. You say, oh, the Royals may not. Maybe we don't hold them to the standard of an average payroll in the majors. Can we hold them to the standard of themselves from 7-8 years ago? Because let's look at the payroll. You're going to say no.
No,
Why?
because you're going to point to the 17 and 18 payroll, one of which reached 165 million and 11th highest in baseball.
I think it's relevant. Let's go back 2013 before this.
I guess my question would be, in what year? Next year?
No, of course not in 1 year, but there's a huge gap there. Like in 2013, they had a payroll of $81 million.
Right.
Now, just 81 million, and just accounting for inflation alone, that's over 100 today. 2014, it got up to 92 million. And then 2014, they went in with hopes of winning, but they didn't have the revenue bump that comes from having gone to the playoffs. The following year, 2015, they were defending AL champs. Payroll went to 113 million, and then they were defending world champs. So in 2016, it was 131 million. 2017, according to the numbers I have here, 140 million. That's usually opening day payroll. You trade for a player mid-season, it may even be higher.
What was 18? Was 18?
Even 2018, 125 million.
Okay. So I thought it peaked a little bit higher than that. Maybe you said opening,
but it also lingered more. Like even after 2018, nobody had any designs on Witt. Like in 2017, after 2017, everyone was gone. Kane was gone, Hosmer was gone,
right.
But they had given out so many. They'd sort of pushed out a lot of that payroll by giving guys long-term deals. They'd signed Ian Kennedy, who was making, I think, $14 million a year. Like there were some bad contracts in there, but the point is, David Glass, who you can say what you want about David Glass. I never thought of David Glass as a guy who's willing to spend whatever it takes to win. That was not the David Glass way, even when they were winning. And he was willing to have payrolls which, just adjusted for inflation today, would be anywhere between 120 and 150 million. And you're right, they're not going to get there in one off season. They shouldn't. But you got to, if you don't start this winter, what you just said, it's hard to add 50 million, 70 million in one off season. So you kind of almost have to work up to it.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And so if we're saying, should we apply that standard that they should be working towards getting to 150, 160, 170 million at a peak? Yes. Do they need to win along the way? Yes, they do, because it's not free money when you get to the postseason, but that's really how ball clubs make money, right? Beyond the obvious just ability to grow in an ungodly, I mean, the economics, not to bore people, but I mean, part of the value of having a team is, David Glass pays $100 million for it. 10 years later, it's worth $500 million. He's got $400 million in equity to take loans out to fund other businesses and operations that at ridiculously low rates. It's like $300 million free dollars to go do other things with. I mean, that's part of what these teams do, is allow you to, have resources to go and invest in other things. And then when you sell, it's a windfall, right? There's all this elements to it. But yes, they should be stepping up towards it. So to beyond just the raw economics of how much, it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar. We made this, we get this, and that's even. Yes, that's true. But I think they need to start stepping up, because we've heard about them wanting to sustain it for the long haul. Every team should want to mimic the Rays and Cardinals. They should do what the Rays and Cardinals do personnel-wise, by the way, if that's what they're going to do. Stop not trading guys, okay? That's something both those clubs will do. The Rays at an obscene level. But also, you can't do it all in 1 year, because then it all is up in 1 year. Like they're creating we love all these rookies being up, but I mean, we're 6 years away from a wave of the exact same thing of rebuilding it. If they're not, even if they're right on all these guys, it's going to crash in 6 years, because they're all due up at the same time. And if you're signing, if you wait till, we got to wait till we show progress. and you don't sign a veteran until you're 3 years in and you're signing them to 3 and 4 year deals, then they're all up at the same time as well. I mean, they have got to do it differently to one succeed, but differently to sustain success. And so to your point, yes, they should be spending money in this offseason. Yes, they should be adding players. They should be identifying prime age players that they can sign to 5 and 6 year deals. Not multiple ones, but at least one
Right. Well, on
premium
that
piece.
Right. On that note, it's interesting because, of course, you and I discussed this last week, and what would be the premium free agent we'd go after. And you mentioned Dansby Swanson. I said I think a pitcher like Mike Clevenger. I asked our friend Joe Sheehan over the weekend this kind of very question, because this came up while we were at the ballpark. Is that the Royals, the payroll is such that the Royals can add basically whoever they want. And I said, who should the Royals try and sign this winter? And without even blinking, he said Trey Turner. And that might sound crazy. Oh, how the Royals going to get Trey Turner? But look, Carlos Correa signed with the Twins. The Royals, from a pure money perspective, could throw. I mean, they can afford to pay Trey Turner $30 million a year. He's going to be 30 years old, 5 years and 150. Is it risky? Sure. But man, if you want to take a risk on somebody, a guy who's plays a premium position, is an elite hitter, and has speed and power, like has all the skills to age very gracefully. That's, I mean, it would take some cojones, but I don't tell me that if the Royals didn't sign Trey Turner, it wouldn't change the perception of this team, not just with the fans, not just in the game, but within the organization itself. And it would certainly solve the problem. Okay, what do you do at shortstop? The answer to who plays shortstop is no longer Bobby Witt or Alberto Mondesi or Nicky Lopez. It's Trey freaking Turner, and then you can put the other pieces around him.
Yeah, but at 30, how much longer is he going to be at shortstop?
Well, I mean, he's got the bat that he can move to second base or even left field.
And who plays shortstop?
Well, who plays any position 3 years out? I'm not. I can't worry about exactly the defensive alignment 3 years out. He can play. He'll be a shortstop for 3 more years, and he has the bat to move after that. That gives you 3 years to come up with an elite defense. Another good shortstop, or maybe you move Bobby Witt there at the age of 24, and he's still young. That's a possibility.
Yeah, because we've enjoyed Bobby Witt's defense so much, we figured it'll just.
I'm just saying, if he develops, and if he doesn't, well, guess what? Even if you didn't sign Trey Turner, you didn't have a shortstop. Like, if you don't sign Trey Turner, who's the shortstop in 3 years? It's not clear to me who that is.
I like this one, Vinny J. Turner has played 130 games 3 times in 8 years.
Well, one of those years he played 59 out of 60 games. There was a pandemic.
True.
Let's not. And one of the other years he played 122, and that's actually. Yeah, I mean, the 6th year he was 2017. He was still like working his way into the lineup. So in 4 of the last 5 years, he has missed no more than 14 games.
Okay, and that's a fair point. I love this comment. Says, "Oh my gosh, Rany, I just got lightheaded." Look, I'm not going to turn down Trey Turner if the Royals want to sign him, but they need to be right if they're going to make that kind of high dollar investment. And I think this is where, that allows them to go out and if the hitting's right, then they can go sign pitching. If the pitching's right, they can go sign hitting. If both of them are close to being right, they can sign a little bit of both. But I think the key is what we're getting at is this can't be an off season of what was their biggest ad last year?
Ooh, that's You happened 8 months ago, and we're both
2 years ago. It was Michael Taylor.
Okay, right. Last year, basically, it was Zach Greinke. It was very clearly, and some of that was the lockout. Okay, that inhibited movement, but yeah, it was Zach Greinke, and
it was Zach Greinke.
We were thrilled. We were thrilled to get him.
It was Zach Greinke and Zach Greinke only. Right? There was literally nothing else to go with it. 2 years ago, it was Michael Taylor and it was Andrew Benintendi. Right? Those were the moves. And I think both of them, we felt like were being signed simply to trade, which they traded one of them.
Well, 2 years ago, I mean, Michael Taylor, it wasn't even the Michael Taylor of this past year where they re-signed him. He was like a 1 year, $1.75 million. I mean, I wouldn't even call that. That's one of those bottom feeding deals that just happened to work out really, really well for the Royals. But I wouldn't even look at that as a big move. The Benintendi thing was a much bigger thing, though. That was a trade. That wasn't where they were spending a ton of money. It was like a 2 year, $14 million commitment. The assets they gave up there were not cash; it was prospects, and they gambled wisely there. But here's the thing: this past winter, like they all they did is add Zach Greinke, and no, I don't think anyone was complaining. Like the team was too far away for a premier free agent to make a difference. But I think they're getting to that point. We've seen with all the hitters they've brought up this year. Like this is the winter you start. It's going to
Yeah,
be a
but
3 or
but
4 year process, but you
I
got to
still think
start this winter.
yeah, you absolutely have to, and it has to be guys that you think it's got to be more than 1 year guys. I
Right,
think whether it's
exactly. It's
trade,
not. I'm not talking about 1 year deals. I'm talking about
right?
2, 3, and 4 year contracts.
Yeah, or and the Carlos Santanas. I know one of the. I'm big in Japan. Still love that handle. Carlos Santana. He put up there. I get that, but I think you said they were too far away to look at that. That was not the view in the off season. That's our obvious realization now, but they were talking about contending. They fired the hitting coach because they weren't contending. They said at that time, we feel like there's a race. We can still get into it.
You're right. There was the rumors. Hassan Latif in our comment sections pointing out they tried to trade for Frankie Montez in Oakland, and yeah, absolutely. That's.
By the way, I was told by folks that in and around Oakland that know the team that the Royals never were on the playing field for what it was going to take to get him, but they were absolutely trying.
Right.
They
the
were
point is,
absolutely
they thought that they were ready to make that move now, and even I thought at the time that was a year ambitious.
And I think had they landed Montas and signed Greinke, this could have looked different, right? Because we wouldn't have had take the worst starter off this team and put Montas in there. I think this team looks different.
It looks different, but it wouldn't have made a difference because ultimately the coaching and the pitching staff as a whole, no one pitcher was going to save this. Even if you take the worst pitcher off this roster, and God knows there's like half a dozen guys you could choose from, and even if Frankie Montas had stayed healthy the whole season, it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough to win the division, but it might have been enough. First of all, I don't believe that a team's record is the sum of its individual pieces. I believe it comes together, or it builds to more than what it is. And I do believe that you're as good as that night starting pitcher. And I've listened to Denny Matthews say it for a lot of years. I mean, I think in football, it's your quarterback. If your quarterback can't go out there and complete passes, teams go in the tank fast. Like, well, this sucks. If you don't get a turnover and get up and play from in front, it quits. Well, that's your pitching. And you come out there and a guy takes a crap in his hat in the first inning and you're down 4-0, it's over. And when it's the hat crapper's turn every time, you don't come to the ballpark feeling like you got a chance to win. But I think it's the mental side of the game is when you've got a starting pitcher that can keep you in the game, then you're a lot sharper as a ball club. And the Royals don't have that. They have it with Brady Singer really only right now. Secondarily with Zach Greinke, and then that's it. There was a little pocket where Daniel Lynch looked like he was getting it. He had a big strikeout game, but otherwise they haven't had it. And if you had Montas in that as well, then I think you could have had a different mindset. And this ball club could have been, we could be sitting here going, if they go 15-6, they're 500, right? And that would be something. But instead, we're talking about them going 6-15 just to avoid losing 100. And I think there'd be value in fighting for 500. That's all I'm
saying. Absolutely. There would be progress in making progress. I mean, they won 74 games last year. Like you're saying, okay, they're probably not going to lose 100, but in order to just match their record last year, they have to go 20-4.
Yeah.
So they're not. I'm sorry. I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to have a worse record. They're heading in the wrong direction, right? They're going to have a worse record this year than last year, and that was not supposed to happen. And that's why everything we're talking about is really it's important, but on some level, if they don't address the pitching system wide, it's window dressing.
Yeah,
which allows me to segue to a very what would ordinarily be a very small news item for another organization, but in Kansas City where we are starved for any kind of news regarding the future of this of the organization's pitching development, I think is a very very interesting piece of news, which is that somebody who many Royals fans didn't even know worked for the team, a guy named Jason Simon-Tachi, who is a former major league pitcher, who was their minor league pitching coordinator announced on LinkedIn, of all places, because we all know we always get breaking baseball news from LinkedIn. I'll just quote it directly. This was from last Thursday? Yeah, so about 4 days ago. My days with the KC Royals are finished. I was blessed to work alongside great people for 5 years and very thankful for that opportunity. God is great, and I'm excited to see what he has in store for me in the future. And I think what's interesting about this is the minor league season is not finished yet. The minor leagues used to finish at right around Labor Day, and that would make a lot more sense if this announcement had come then. And he's not saying he was fired. It just he said that my days with the Royals are finished, but there's still two. So I don't think he left the team midseason. I think that he is already being he's
Told that
already
he's
announcing his
not getting a
plans, right?
contract.
This is what the future holds for him. Well, that future is coming, which means 2 weeks before all the minor league games are done, the Royals have already started to inform. And as much as I talk about the major league pitching coach, we have made the point that getting rid of the major league pitching coach is not sufficient. This is an organization-wide disaster and it needs organization-wide solutions. So for somebody in the minor leagues who's as responsible for what's the disaster that the minor league pitching development has been this year, as much as Cal Eldred has been at the major league level, and I'm not apportioning the blame. I don't know who's to blame. My glib answer is everyone is to blame. So the Royals are starting to make decisions ahead of time. That might be the single most positive piece of information that we've gotten about what the Royals are thinking and what they're planning to do this winter that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I think changes are coming. The question is, how much will it be?
Right.
Right.
And
That's going to
but
be
I'm glad this is like if you just cut off the top branch, it wasn't going to be enough. This is a root that is being taken out. We'll see if there'll be more roots taken out of people, Paul Gibson and some of the other names we hear in the minor league system. There are guys down there, I don't know who the A-ball pitching coach is, but the people who are responsible for setting that tone from the very bottom all the way up, if a lot of roots start getting pulled in the next month or so, we'll know in the first 2 weeks after the season ends probably. But if that happens, then I think it could be a very interesting offseason. And I think 2023, you add there's the potential for that Orioles-like surprise next season if we start to see those changes made.
Rule changes. We touched on this a little bit on Friday with you and Joe Sheehan. Um, what do you make of the rule changes and how they will? And we had this question earlier, and it's a ways back. I was saving it because I knew we were going to get to it. But what do we think of the rule changes and how they will affect the Kansas City Royals?
So let's go through them one by one to make sure, because there are a lot of them. We have the ban the shift change where you're going to have 2 infielders on each side of second base. And as much as I feel like this is a change that doesn't need to be made because it really doesn't address what the baseball is trying to accomplish. What baseball is trying to accomplish is more action. But more action means less strikeouts. And banning the shift has nothing to do with strikeouts. I really don't understand the point of it. But having said that, I don't think banning the shift in terms of where the infielders are relative to second base, I don't think it's really going to have a huge impact. The batting average on balls in play don't make a huge difference when it comes to where the infielders are relative to second base. But the actual bigger part of that rule is that they have to have their feet on the dirt. That, I think, is a much bigger change. I mean, sitting at Kauffman this weekend, MJ Melendez hit like 4 or 5 well-struck, pulled balls that the second baseman fielded in short right field and threw him out at first base. And that's the sort of thing you're not going to see very much of because you can't put a second baseman. You can't play rover anymore. You can't be out 200
Right.
feet. And I actually think hard hit balls like that are going to be rewarded more because there's a limit to how far an infielder can be, and that limits his range if you can only stand 130 feet at most from home plate. And I actually saw today that some of the data run that MJ Melendez is actually it was kind of interesting that he was one of the hitters that would benefit most from that shift change. So I think just in general, hard hit balls and pull hitting will be rewarded. And what's interesting is that the Royals, this new hitting philosophy, they are sort of making that transition away from the slap hitting, contact hitting Nicky Lopez Royals, which worked wonderfully in 2015, but doesn't work today. They're making that change to the MJ Melendez, pull the ball and take your walks type of offense. They might benefit a little bit from that, but the biggest change that I think people are not appreciating is the change which requires, which basically limits a pitcher to making 3 pickoff throws to a base, to first base. If you don't pick off the guy on the first 2 throws, if you make a third throw and he's safe, it's an automatic balk. And essentially, it's actually better than a second base, better than a stolen base, because any other runners on base will also move up. There is a potential that this could dramatically increase the number of stolen bases that we see, because pitchers are going to be very reluctant to throw over to first base more than once with that batter on base. And so you're going to be able to get bigger leads. They're also making the bases a little bit bigger, 3 inches large. It's not a huge deal, but all these things add up. They're trying to add stolen bases to the game. And, it's that part of it's kind of ironic, because the Royals have been one of the most stolen base centric teams in baseball for the last 20, 30 years, but they may be getting away from that a little bit with their emphasis on power. I do think Bobby Witt could easily steal 50 or 60 bases next season. So we may see some outrageous stolen base totals. Like, it almost might affect your rotisserie team more than it affects real baseball, because you're going to see some huge stolen base totals. But at this point, I really feel like, especially with Merrifield gone, the only guy with truly elite speed is on the base paths is Bobby Witt, and so you may see a huge jump in his stolen bases.
Mondesi, if he
got that's a good point. I mean, I'm not looking at stolen bases this year, but yes, Mondesi, if he's healthy, could be a monster stolen base guy.
They do have some guys in the minor leagues too that are stealing. I forget the outfielder who can't hit. They've got another.
Well, Tyler Tolbert, the new Terrence Gore.
Yes,
the A-ball season is finished, and I believe he made history: 60 stolen bases, 0 caught stealings.
Yeah,
I'm quite certain that has never happened in professional.
And he batted like 210, though. Let's be clear.
Yeah, 220. But I mean, honestly, he's probably a better offensive threat than Terrence Gore is right now. If you're 60 for 60 in steals, you might have if the Royals are in contention next year or any year in the near future, I absolutely think he'd be up on September 1st. September 1st has long been known as Terrence Gore Day in baseball, and it happened again this year. I believe the Mets brought him up on September 1st. He's still out there, still stealing bases, coming off the bench for teams. But Tyler Tolbert could be that guy in Kansas City starting next year.
Yeah, and by the way, I like what Matt says. He said we're going to see massive secondary leads after two throws to first. I actually think it'll go a lot up after 1. Right? Like, I mean, overall, the lead should be bigger because pitchers are going to be tentative with the throwovers in general. I hate the shift. I mean, I think if you would just teach hitters how to hit against it, it would correct itself. And so I hate the rules on the shift. But if they're coming, fine. Somebody asked, is the goal to add more offense or to shorten the games? That would seem to be at odds with each other. It's both. Right, it's to add more. It's not necessarily to add more runs on the scoreboard. It's to add more activity. They recognize it's 2 jackasses playing catch and a bunch of guys standing around.
It's to add more activity and to reduce dead time between those activities. Right, the pitch clock. Yeah. I love the pitch clock. As much as I'm frustrated that the shift ban doesn't really do what they purporting it will do, I think the pitch clock, I mean, it was interesting because Sunday's game, it was almost as if the pitch clock was implemented, because Brady Singer works as fast as certainly faster than anybody on the Royals, but one of the fastest working pitchers in the sport. He gets the ball back, he sets up, he throws. And that doesn't seem to affect his stuff at all, but like, it's such a joy to watch a game where I don't have to look at Twitter on my phone between every pitch because there's 30 seconds. It's like 15 seconds and throw. And Tyler Alexander on the Tigers was working at a similar pace. The game was 2 hours and 11 minutes. And it was the people sometimes say, well, if you love baseball, why don't you want more baseball? Why don't you want a 4-hour game? I want a 4-hour game if there's 4 hours of action. If I'm watching a 4-2 sport and, there's so much dead time between pitches, that's not more baseball. That's more dead time between the baseball.
If you give me a 13-inning classic that goes that long, and each team is scoring in the extra innings, and
the wild card game was almost 5 hours. Nobody's claiming that was boring.
Yeah. I want a longer game, and they can step out and scratch all they want when I have crown seats. Isn't very often, but when it's all you can eat and drink, bring it on. I am down for the long games there. And by the way, every time I've gotten a hold of Crown Seats, somebody's invited me to go with them. 151. Do you remember Luke Hochevar threw a 10
Yeah.
strikeout? I was in the Crown Seats
You're
that
like
night.
80 pitches, the
Oh,
complete game.
yeah, the 80 pitch complete game, and somebody else, like every freak, like short game, I'm there.
You're in the Crown Seats.
100%. You want to get out early? Just invite.
They hadn't even had time to bring out the dessert yet, and the game was already over.
Oh, it's always lightning fast when I'm there. But I will say this: I'm amazed that they're going to limit the throws to first base, but they won't limit the visits to the mound. I mean, that just chaps my ass to no end.
Well, don't they already have that rule in place?
Well, it's like what is it? 20?
It's 6. Yeah, I mean
it's 6, but what doesn't count are catcher visits.
Okay, so you would actually have a rule to ban catcher visits. Yeah,
I would not allow you to visit the mound.
I would be on board with that. I think it's almost like the intentional walk where you just put up the fingers. It's a good idea, but it's really not going to shave that much time off the game. The pitch clock
it will help the playoff games. It'll help
playoff games maybe.
They talk after every pitch.
My hope is that the pitch clock. Well, part of it also is the pitch clock. I'm actually not sure how, because you only have a certain amount of time between pitches. How do they handle a mound visit? I assume that doesn't count against the clock. But once you have a framework in place, like once you have rules in place that people understand there's a pitch clock, it's much easier to tweak those rules to start adding and say, now a mound visit counts against your time or whatever. That the hardest rule to implement is the first one, is to say we're going to have a clock. Having a clock in baseball is such a sea change.
No, that's a great point.
So I'm hoping, like, the key is that it actually works and that the players accept it, because there's a lot of grumbling among the players. And, I know there's a lot of skepticism out there that they'll ever actually get to opening day next year and have it in place. But if we can get that rule to stick, everything else you're talking about is gravy. Like the basketball shot clock was 35 seconds originally? Way too long. But once you have a 35-second shot clock, much easier to say.
We're going to make college. It was 40, and in the NBA they went right to 24. But
fair enough. But then you can tweak it. It's a lot easier once you've got the culture to accept that there is a clock. Right. It's much easier then to tighten it up. Just like now, the having the new rule that's in place this year that limits teams having 13 pitchers on a roster. Limiting teams to 13 is already way too many. It's not going to do much. But putting that rule in place, and there was a lot of grumbling of that. Some teams want to have 14 pitchers, and I have no idea why. You want to have 3 guys on your bench, and you want to have 9 relievers. That's insane. But you have to save teams from themselves. Now that there is a rule that limits teams to 13 pitchers, it will make it that much easier, hopefully, in the next couple of years to make it 12, maybe even one day 11. That will have a huge impact on the game, because you can no longer have a bunch of guys who just throw one inning as hard as they can and have strikeout rates of 40%. Because ultimately, everything we're talking about here is a way to get around the strikeouts and try to put more contact back into the sport, because the sport is more fun when balls are in play.
I'm being told catcher visits to the mound do count, so maybe I'm wrong on that. To me, what I would like is like no stepping out of the box. Once you step into the box, you're in the box. Pitcher can't. You're up there. You got to throw. There's no like, oh, you can twice restart it by stepping off the rubber. No, you step on the rubber. Clock's going. You got to go. Right. You don't get 2 extensions of the shot clock in the NBA. Let's go. But to your point, I mean, it's like mass transit. Everybody, well, what are you doing? You're only building it from A to B. Well, yeah, we build A to B, and then we spoke off of that, and so I get that's.
I'm really excited to see. I mean, if we can just get yes, it's not the rule I want 100% now, but as long as they don't water it down between now and opening day next year, I think this could be the story of baseball next April. Is, oh my God, the game looks so different, and it's in a good way. Like they're playing baseball. They're not sitting around scratching themselves. Batters aren't stepping up, because I mean, the rule doesn't say you can't step out, but it does say if you're not ready to swing within a certain amount of time, it's an automatic strike. So batters are automatically they're not going to stop and adjust their gloves 6 times. Pitcher's not going to talk to himself behind the mound. It's going to be get the ball and go, and the batter get your butt in the box because the pitch is coming.
Listen, the bottom line is this. European soccer is tremendously popular, and soccer is growing in this country because they play the game, right? That's what they do. You sit down, you view it, you get the game. Formula One racing, they start that thing and we're going. And there's no commercials, and you get to see the race, and it's growing in popularity. American sports is like America. It's the most litigious pain in the ass to get through any American sport. It's unreal. You watch an NBA playoff game, last 45 seconds takes 42 minutes because they stop and review everything.
Mhm.
Baseball, a playoff game takes 5 hours because there's 700 mound visits, and then they review everything on that. Now it's the most litigious crap ever, and it kills the sport, and it kills the youth interest in sport. You want to know why kids play video games? Well, why don't you go out and watch a baseball game? I would if they ever played baseball, but near as I can tell, it's a bunch of guys standing around grabbing their ass. That's all it is. Where meanwhile, if I play Fortnite, it's game on, and I hit start again, and I'm playing. They get constant action, and that's what American sports. I don't care what two tired old fat asses like me and you want, right? Like, oh, they're talking about the strategy, and it gives me time to talk with my dad. I love this one. Me and my dad love talking the strategy. God bless you if you get to watch 70 games a year with your dad. You probably get one. So structuring a sport that the one or two times you get to watch a game with your dad, or even your buddy who really likes baseball, like you and Joe, how many times do you get to sit and digest a baseball game like you and Joe did? If that was your experience 162 times a year, great. Let's have 4.5-hour baseball games. But that's not what it normally is. And you're losing your fan base. You're not cultivating new fans. You need to be able to get new people to the game. And the game is a wonderful game. But standing around talking about the game is not playing the game.
Yeah, I challenge anybody who disagrees with you and me. Go on YouTube, find a ball game from the 1980s, and just put it on and just watch the rhythm of the sport, because so much of this added dead time has come into the game over the last 30 or 40 years, because pitchers have learned that if they can take a few extra seconds between pitches, they can throw a little bit harder. That may be what I'm hoping is an ancillary benefit. It may or may not. If it does, it's gravy, but that it may force by forcing pitchers to not take so much time, they may lose a little bit of velocity, which might bring down the strikeout rate. There may be an indirect effect there, because what happens now is, Pedro Baez takes 6 extra breaths before he throws a pitch, because he wants to get that extra half mile an hour, squeeze it out of his arm. But if you watch a game from the 80s, it was brisk, it was fun, it was exactly to Tony on the screen here. Tony, I blame the Yankees and Red Sox on ESPN for all of this crap. I mean, the ESPN factor with commercials and all the bells and whistles between pitches has added to it. But the Yankees and Red Sox were ahead of the curve. That's why they were always so dominant, by realizing that taking your time might, on an individual level, on a team level, might be good. The problem is, if everybody does what's good for them individually, the game as a whole becomes just really boring. And I'm really hoping that this will reverse that.
I want to finish with this because it was asked several times by several people along the way tonight in the chat room. And again, if you're catching us by the podcast, we stream live Sunday night, usually, sometimes Monday night, like tonight at 10 p.m. Central. And by the way, we'd love your likes, your loves, your subscriptions. Subscribe, hit that button. It's great for us. We would appreciate it. It doesn't cost you nothing. But Mike Matheny's future with the ball club. What's your prediction on what happens? Does anything happen this offseason in your mind on Mike Matheny?
Well, I can say with a reasonable amount of confidence that this will be the year that the pitching coach is let go. Joe has already told me that he cannot wait to see my face when the moment we find out that Cal Eldred is coming back, but I still think that that's unlikely. I think my face will become a meme if it does come to pass. And so the question is,
Cal Eldred was, in my opinion, and we talked about this, we don't have to go through the details, but when he was one of them, not going to Toronto, that ship sailed.
I would like to have thought so. Certainly, having watched the Royals give up 18 runs to the Detroit freaking Tigers in 17 innings on Friday and Saturday. I mean, do you know how bad the Tigers' offense is? And the Royals gave up 18 runs. Basically, Royals pitchers not named Brady Singer gave up 18 runs in 19 innings to Detroit this weekend. there's just it's just completely indefensible.
You can make it even worse. I mean, Dylan Coleman and Scott Barlow also
Right.
finished off that game.
But I'm saying even include them in there, and it's still 18 runs in 19 innings. Like if you just take Brady Singer, the one great shining success, that's great. If you take him out, it's a disaster. So the question is, does Cal Eldred cost his buddy Mike Matheny his job as well? I think it's quite possible. I don't. I'm not a betting man. I'd probably say 40-60. Like it's still, if I gun to my head, I'd say Mike Matheny comes back because the Royals have taught me to always assume that they won't make the correct move when push comes to shove. But I would have said 20-80 even 2 months ago. And I do feel like there is a growing sentiment within the organization that there is a lot of talent here, and it would be a tremendous shame to waste that talent for another year because you weren't actually committed to giving that talent the best chance to succeed.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Mike Matheny is the reason why they're failing, but he's certainly not pushing this roster and this organization towards success. And at some point, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So I think Mike Matheny is part of the problem.
Vinny J said, fire everybody from the 04 Cardinals. Simon Tachi, Matheny, Mabry, definitely Cal Eldred. I do like this. I'm big in Japan. Go get Joe Madden. He got fired without getting to show his team his Mohawk. I cannot see a world where Joe Madden exists with Dayton Moore. Can you?
No, and frankly, I don't think I would want that. Joe Madden was, state of the art 10 years ago.
Joe Madden was not the problem with the Angels.
No, but he wasn't the solution either. And it's interesting.
No manager's the solution for a poorly constructed ball club.
No, but I want a manager who is willing to work. Like an organization works best when everybody's on the same page. And some of the comments he has made that have gotten a lot of attention since he was let go by the Angels. And look, I will say the Angels are so dysfunctional. Yeah, I'm not blaming him for what was going on there, but some of the comments he said in general about how a manager should be allowed to manage and not have the input of the front office. I think the best organizations, the manager works hand in glove with the general manager. They got to work together. And so you said, can Dayton Moore work with Joe Madden? Probably not, which means Joe Madden can't work with Dayton Moore, which means it won't work.
I agree, but I will say this. That's what everybody says every time Buck Showalter gets fired. Then he gets hired someplace else and he wins. Every time Buck Showalter gets fired, it's like, he's a pain in the ass. It's Buck's way or the highway.
Soren, I have been trying
Buck
to get
Showalter that do what Buck Showalter wants.
I have been trying to get Buck Showalter hired as the Royals manager for literally over 20 years now. When they fired Tony Muser, I had a Buck Showalter campaign going, and every time the Royals have bypassed him for freaking Tony Pena and Buddy Bell, and meanwhile he keeps going on to hopeless organizations and turning them around. Buck Showalter is in his own class. If there's somebody at that level, absolutely. I just don't think Joe Madden is there anymore. I do think the game has kind of left him behind a little bit.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That may be the case. By the way, Buck Showalter was very much in consideration when Tony Pena got the job. The exact details of how he didn't get it and what was there. And let's keep in mind, Tony Pena was manager of the year in 03.
2003 was under his watch. So he did have a winning record with the Royals, which a lot of guys can't say.
I tend to believe that Buck Showalter was offered the job, and Buck Showalter said, these are the things that have to happen in the organization, and they weren't going to happen. And he said, I don't want the job. I think that's part of the key to
honestly, I'd feel better if I knew that were the case, because then at least I knew the Royals were smart enough to want him, but it was still David Glass was not yet willing to amend his ways. And maybe the failure to get Buck Showalter and what happened afterwards made him realize, okay, I need to back off and let my employees do their job, and that's the only way I'm going to get Dayton Moore in the first place.
Yeah. All right, Rany, I'm glad you had a great trip here to Kansas City.
Thank you. I would love to be able to come down 3 or 4 or 5 times a year because the Royals are winning. My kids are getting a little bit older now. I can leave them for a weekend here and there. So I don't want this to be a once a year pilgrimage. I would love for it to be a more common event, but the Royals need to make it worth my while.
I would too, and I'd like you and Joe to come. I'd like Joe to come back as well, and I'd like you to not come in on Red Friday, where I can be like, we're going to do 2 hours with Rany and Joe, and we're going to talk a ton of baseball, and but the Red Friday, Like, come
Red
on.
Friday, and the Royals are 25 below 500.
Yeah.
I'm still astounded you let us come on the air at all. So thanks for carving out 15 or 20 minutes, or actually closer to an hour on the first Red Friday of the season. So
Yeah, absolutely. Always a great time talking baseball with you. Love our Kauffman Corner. We'll be back at it next week, Rany, Jazayerli, and myself. So for the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. And catch my work at 810WHB.com. You can catch Rany's work right here on the Kauffman Corner. We will see you next time. I believe Sunday is our plan, but who knows? Stay tuned. We'll tweet it out Sunday or Monday. Thanks for joining us here on Kauffman Corner.